Have you ever walked into a house you once called home, only to realize you were the outsider in someone else's plan? I drove 9 hours for Thanksgiving dinner, carrying pies, gifts, and hope. And within seconds of stepping inside, I learned my son and his wife were plotting my destruction. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The hallway smelled of roasted turkey, nutmeg, and pumpkin spice, everything that should have felt like comfort. I held a warm apple pie in my hands, wrapped carefully in a red check towel, the same way I had carried pies to school bake sales when Andrew was a boy. I wanted to surprise them. I imagined Clara, my daughter-in-law, opening the kitchen door with that polite smile of hers, Andrew hugging me and saying, "Mom, you made it." I pictured my grandchildren's laughter running down the stairs. That's what I thought was waiting for me. But as I reached the kitchen door, I froze. The door was slightly ajar. Behind it, voices slithered through the crack like smoke. Clara's voice, sharp, low, and dripping with venom. "Just one more week of tea," she hissed. "That's all it takes. Once she starts forgetting names, the doctor will sign the papers. She'll be officially incompetent, and the guardianship will be ours." A silence followed. Then Andrew's sigh, heavy, defeated. My own son's voice, weak, trembling. "Clara, are you sure? She's my mother. What if nothing?" Clara cut him off, her words slicing through the air. "Do you want to keep drowning in debt? Or do you want the farm? It's worth $2 million, Andrew. Do you think she'll live forever? Or are you too much of a coward to take care of your family?" The pie slipped from my hands before I could stop it. It hit the hardwood floor with a dull crash, the crust shattering, cinnamon and apple scattering like ashes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air reeked of betrayal. My chest tightened, as though invisible hands had wrapped around my lungs. I stumbled back, one hand braced against the wall. My son, my own blood, the boy I had raised on bedtime stories and warm casseroles, the man I drove 9 hours to see. He was standing on the other side of that door, listening to his wife plan my undoing. And he did not stop her. I pressed my palm over my mouth, terrified the sound of my breath would give me away. Every instinct screamed at me to walk in. Confront them, demand answers, but something colder held me still. If Clara was willing to poison me, what would she do if she knew I had heard? The kitchen smelled like roasted turkey, gravy simmering, pumpkin pies cooling on the counter. But to me, it stank of rot. Every smell I loved about Thanksgiving now soured into something poisonous. I remembered the drive here, 9 hours across the mountains of New England. I had whispered to myself that this year would be different, that this would be the year Andrew and I put distance behind us, that Clara and I finally understood one another, that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't spend Christmas alone. And here I was, barely a minute in the house, already shattered. From the kitchen, Clara laughed. Soft, cold, triumphant. By Christmas, she won't even remember her own name. By spring, we'll be the legal guardians of the farm. And then, freedom. Freedom. That was the word that broke me. She wanted freedom. From me. From the woman who raised her husband. From the very person whose land she was stealing. I backed away, one step, then another, until my heel hit the baseboard heater. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clutch the wall. The apple pie lay broken on the floor, a symbol of everything I thought this holiday was supposed to mean. Family, togetherness, home. It was all a lie. And as I stood there, staring at the shattered pieces of what I had brought, one thought pierced through the fog of shock and pain. They weren't planning Thanksgiving dinner. They were planning my disappearance. The Vermont sun was low and golden that morning, pouring through the kitchen window of my old farmhouse. It bathed the wooden counters in light, the same way it had for decades. Outside, the maple trees were dressed in their last fire-colored leaves, as if the land itself had decided to put on its Sunday best for Thanksgiving. I laid out the gifts on the dining table, each one carefully wrapped in brown paper tied with twine. Simple, thoughtful. For the grandchildren, knitted scarves I'd worked on during long evenings, bright red and navy blue. For Clara, a set of antique serving spoons from my mother's collection. For Andrew, a first edition copy of The Old Man and the Sea I'd found at a used bookstore in Montpelier, because once, long ago, he had told me that Hemingway reminded him of his father. And then there was the pie. Apple, of course. Always apple. The recipe was older than Andrew himself. Flour, butter, cinnamon, apples from the orchard out back. That pie had been present at every holiday, every celebration, every time life tried to fall apart, and I needed something to hold us together. As I slid the pie into its carrier, I caught myself smiling. 9 hours of driving didn't scare me. Not when the prize waiting at the other end was family. I told myself, this year will be different. It had to be. The years had been rough since Richard passed. The house was too quiet, the winters too long. Holidays were the hardest. Just me, a single plate, a single chair by the fire. But this year, Andrew had invited me. Clara had even sent me a message. "We'd love to have you, Mom. The kids can't wait." I clung to those words like a lifeline. Maybe the past misunderstandings, the cold phone calls, the distance, they were all just bumps in the road. Blood is thicker than water after all, right? As I packed my suitcase, I tucked in Richard's old handkerchief, white cotton, with a tiny blue R embroidered in the corner. He had carried it in his breast pocket every Sunday. I told myself it was like bringing him along for the trip. He would have wanted to be there. He would have wanted to see the family he loved sitting around a table, together. I could almost hear his voice. "Marjorie, family's like a garden. You water it. It grows. You neglect it. It withers." I believed that. I had always believed that. I folded sweaters, wool socks, and my nicest cardigan into the suitcase. My hands paused on the photo frame that sat on the dresser. It was an old picture of Andrew as a boy, holding up a lopsided snowman we'd built together in the yard. His cheeks were red, his grin wide. Back then, he had looked at me like I was the center of his world. I whispered to the photo, "It's going to be okay this year. We'll sit by the fire. We'll tell stories. We'll laugh like we used to." Maybe Clara and I would finally find common ground. She was sharp, ambitious, always moving 100 miles an hour, so different from me. But surely, once we broke bread together, we'd bridge that gap. I had convinced myself that all it would take was one holiday, one real conversation, and we'd finally be a family in every sense of the word. I slipped my pearl earrings into a small pouch. Richard had given them to me on our 40th wedding anniversary. I decided I'd wear them for Thanksgiving dinner, not because anyone cared about jewelry, but because they made me feel like the woman Richard had loved. Strong, respected, worthy. The farmhouse creaked in the wind, familiar and steady. 50 acres of land stretched out beyond the window. Every fence post and tree carrying decades of sweat and memory. Richard and I had built a life here from scratch. We had fought blizzards, droughts, and lean harvests, but we had always come out stronger. This land wasn't just dirt and timber. It was the soul of our family. And yet, I told myself it was time to let go. At least a little. Let Andrew take the reins. He was ready, wasn't he? Clara was capable, wasn't she? Surely they only wanted what was best. Hope can be a dangerous thing, but in that moment, I clung to it like it was oxygen. I loaded the suitcase into the back of my old SUV, the pie secured on the passenger seat like it was a newborn child. I looked at the farmhouse one last time before pulling away, the chimney puffing smoke into the crisp air. I whispered, "See you soon, Richard." The road stretched out before me, miles of mountains and valleys glowing in the late autumn sun. The radio played old country songs, and I hummed along. With every mile, I grew lighter. I wasn't driving away from loneliness. I was driving toward reunion, toward healing. I pictured it all so vividly. The grandchildren running into my arms, Clara smiling warmly, Andrew pouring me a glass of cider and saying, "Welcome home, Mom." The picture was so clear, so perfect, that it blinded me to the cracks already forming beneath the surface. Because when you want something badly enough, you ignore the shadows in the corner. You tell yourself everything's fine. You believe in an illusion. And I believed, with all my heart, that this Thanksgiving would bring me home again. The drive stretched long and quiet. The kind of highway silence that makes you start talking to yourself just to hear a voice. I'd been on the road for 5 hours already, the pie still holding steady on the seat beside me. Vermont was fading behind in the rear view, the last ridges of the Green Mountains slipping into distance. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I pulled off at a rest stop somewhere in upstate New York, the kind with a gas station, a tired-looking diner, and vending machines humming in the corner. The wind carried a bite that cut through my wool coat as I walked inside. I ordered a cup of black coffee, just to keep myself sharp, and sat at a booth with cracked red vinyl. That's when my phone buzzed. Andrew. My heart jumped the way it always did when he called. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, maybe months. I wiped my hands on a napkin and answered quickly. "Andrew, I'm halfway there," I said, smiling at nothing, just the sound of him. He laughed lightly, but it sounded strained. "Hey, Mom, you doing okay? How's the drive?" "Long," I admitted, "but worth it. I can't wait to see you all." There was a pause. Too long. Then his voice, softer. "Yeah, me too." Something in that "me too" didn't land right. It was thin, almost rehearsed. My coffee arrived, and I stirred it with the cheap plastic stirrer, trying to fill the silence. "Mom," Andrew said suddenly, his words tumbling fast. "You've been feeling all right, haven't you? I mean, sleeping okay? Not forgetting things, right?" The stirrer stopped in my hand. "Forgetting things? What are you talking about?" "Oh, nothing," he said quickly. But his voice cracked at the edges. "I just, you know, people your age, sometimes it happens. No big deal. I just want you to take care of yourself." "People my age," I repeated, letting the words hang. "Andrew Hale, if you're trying to say I'm losing my marbles, you've got another thing coming." He chuckled weakly, but it sounded more like a cough. No, I didn't mean it like that. I just mean, don't overdo it, okay? Don't stress about the trip. Clara and I can handle everything. You just rest. We've got it covered." Rest. Handle everything. His words didn't feel like comfort. They felt like a warning. I forced a laugh. "Well, I'm not planning on running laps around the table, if that's what you're worried about. I'm driving. I'm eating. I'm bringing dessert. That's all the heavy lifting I need to do." Right. His voice faded for a second, like he'd covered the receiver. I thought I heard Clara in the background, a murmur I couldn't make out. Then Andrew came back, too chipper now, like he'd flipped a switch. "Okay, Mom, just wanted to check in. Drive safe. Don't push yourself." And then he was gone. The call had lasted 3 minutes, but it weighed on me heavier than the whole 5 hours of driving. I sipped my coffee, bitter and lukewarm, staring at the condensation sliding down the glass. Not forgetting things, right? What kind of son says that to his mother out of the blue? I told myself I was overthinking. He was just concerned, that's all. Maybe he'd read an article about dementia. Maybe he'd seen a neighbor struggling. People say awkward things when they're worried, but deep down, the words sat wrong, like a loose thread on a sweater. You tug a little, and suddenly the whole thing starts to unravel. I shoved the thought aside. I had always been sensitive, prone to reading too much into tone, pauses, silences. Richard used to tease me about it. You can sniff out a lie before a man even knows he's telling it. Maybe I was doing it again. Maybe Andrew's hesitation was nothing more than fatigue, stress, debt, the weight of 2 kids and a mortgage. Life had never been easy on him. Still, the image of Clara's face flickered in my mind. Her perfect smile, polished words, the way she never quite met my eyes. And now Andrew, calling to remind me that old age brings confusion, as if he was planting a seed. I shook my head hard. No, that was paranoia talking. I drained the rest of my coffee, bitter to the last drop, and slid out of the booth. The pie was waiting in the car, the gifts stacked neatly, my suitcase packed with hope. I told myself to keep my chin up, to keep the faith. Families stumble, but they come around. That's what I believed as I pulled back onto the highway. But somewhere in the pit of my stomach, a voice whispered, "The first crack has already shown." The sun was sliding lower, casting long shadows over the rolling hills of New England. My SUV hummed steadily along the interstate, the mountains painted in gold and rust. Maple leaves swirled across the road like embers from a dying fire. I cracked the window to let in the crisp autumn air, sharp enough to sting my lungs, but clean, honest. This was the kind of landscape Richard had loved. He used to say Vermont didn't just grow crops. It grew character. Every fence post we dug, every calf we raised, every storm we survived was proof of that. The road curved around a ridge, and suddenly I was driving through a tunnel of flaming red maples. The beauty hit me square in the chest. And just like that, memory took over. I could hear Richard's voice as if he were sitting in the passenger seat beside me, his hand resting on the worn leather armrest, eyes fixed on the land with that steady look of his. "Marjorie," he'd said once, years ago, standing on the porch with a mug of coffee, "this farm isn't just property. It's our legacy, a piece of soul carved into soil. Don't you ever let anyone take it from you. Not the bank, not a developer, not even family if they lose their way. You fight for it. Promise me." At the time, I'd laughed and swatted at him with the dish towel. "Who would take it from us, Richard? Andrew will keep it safe when we're gone." But he hadn't laughed. His eyes, gray as the November sky, had stayed locked on mine. "Just promise me, Marjorie." And I had, without thinking, without hesitation, because back then, I believed promises like that were easy to keep. Now, as the tires ate up the miles toward Andrew's house, those words felt like stone pressing down on my chest. Promise me. The memory was so clear I could almost smell his aftershave, hear the creak of the rocking chair on the porch. Richard had been a man of few words, but the ones he chose never faded. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white. For the first time since Andrew's strange phone call, I felt the stirrings of something stronger than fear. Resolve. The truth was, I had spent too many years second-guessing myself, letting doubt creep in like mold in the corners of a room. Clara's polished confidence, Andrew's weary silence, they made me question my place, my worth. But this land, this legacy, was not up for negotiation. Richard and I had built that farm from scratch, 50 acres of stubborn soil that we turned fertile with sweat and prayer. I remembered the winter of '82, when the snow caved in half the barn roof. Richard had worked through the night with nothing but a lantern and determination, hauling beams until his back nearly broke. When I begged him to rest, he'd smiled and said, "We don't quit, Marjorie. Hale blood doesn't run cold." We had fought droughts, floods, sick cattle, and mortgage scares. We had held onto that farm when neighbors sold theirs off for pennies to slick developers who promised quick money and left them broke. We had survived every storm together, and now Clara thought she could steal it with a smile and a teacup. Not in my backyard. The thought made me laugh out loud, startling myself. A bitter laugh, but real. If she thought she could outwit me, she didn't know who she was dealing with. The road leveled out, and a green highway sign flashed by. Albany, 65 miles. I still had hours to go, but suddenly the drive didn't feel as heavy. Every mile was a reminder of what was at stake. Not just a house, not just land, but Richard's memory, my life's work, and the roots of our family tree. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught sight of my own face, lined, weary, but steady. My hair was pinned back in a neat bun, silver strands glinting in the light. Richard used to tease me. "You've got steel under all that lace." Maybe he was right. I rolled the thought over and over in my head. Steel under lace. I could almost picture him sitting here, giving me that half smile, the one that said he believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. The car radio crackled, catching a local station. A country singer's voice filled the car. "You can tear a house down brick by brick, but you can't burn the memories." I turned it up. My throat tightened, but I kept driving. The first crack had shown back at that rest stop when Andrew hinted at forgetting things. But this memory of Richard, was the mortar holding me together. If Clara thought I was weak, if Andrew thought I was too old, they had another thing coming. I whispered into the wind rushing past my window. "I promised you, Richard. I'm keeping that promise." The SUV climbed another hill, and when it crested, the valley opened wide before me, fields dotted with barns, a river threading silver in the distance, the horizon burning orange with sunset. It looked eternal, untouchable. But I knew better. Legacies could be stolen, erased, twisted into someone else's fortune if you weren't careful. Not mine, not ours. I pressed my foot a little harder on the gas. For the first time on that trip, I wasn't just a widow driving to Thanksgiving. I was a guardian of something bigger, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. By the time I pulled into Andrew's driveway, the sky had gone the color of steel. The last streaks of daylight clung to the horizon, and the house glowed warm against the cold. Lights in every window, smoke rising from the chimney. On the surface, it looked like the picture of family. I sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. 9 hours of driving, a head full of memories, and now here I was, staring at the front porch where my son's life unfolded without me. I forced a smile at my reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothed down my silver bun, and whispered, "Showtime." The door swung open before I even knocked. Clara. She was radiant in a cream-colored sweater dress, her blonde hair tucked behind pearl-studded earrings. She spread her arms wide as if I were a long-lost treasure. "Mom!" she exclaimed, voice honeyed and bright. "You made it. Oh, look at you, driving all this way by yourself. You're incredible." Before I could answer, she wrapped me in a hug that was just a little too tight, just a little too long. Her perfume, sharp and floral, clung to my coat. Andrew appeared behind her, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped like a boy caught in the rain. He gave me a quick half smile, but his eyes didn't meet mine. "Hi, Mom," he muttered. I wanted to throw my arms around him, to shake him, to say, "Don't you remember who I am?" Instead, I simply touched his cheek and said, "It's good to see you, Andrew." Clara, ever the hostess, took my suitcase before I could protest. Come in. You must be exhausted. Let me get you settled." The house smelled of rosemary and roasted turkey, pies cooling on the counter, candles burning cinnamon spice. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt staged, like a holiday spread in a glossy magazine. She led me into the living room where the fire crackled cheerfully. I sank into the couch, grateful to rest my legs, and then she appeared again, carrying a delicate porcelain cup. Steam curled upward, carrying a faint herbal scent. "I made this just for you," she said sweetly, setting it in my hands. "A special herbal blend. Calms the nerves. Helps you sleep after a long trip. My grandmother swore by it." I hesitated for only a second. Then, tired and touched by her thoughtfulness, I smiled. "That's kind of you, Clara. Thank you." The cup was warm, almost too warm. I blew across the surface and took a sip. The flavor was earthy, with a strange bitterness under the honey. Not unpleasant, just unusual. Clara watched me closely, her eyes sharp despite the smile on her lips. "Good?" she asked. I nodded. "Very soothing. You didn't have to fuss over me like this." "Nonsense," she said, her voice light. "Your family. We take care of each other." The words hit me oddly, but I pushed the thought aside. I was tired, hungry, and just relieved to finally be here. Andrew sat across from me, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. He still hadn't said more than a handful of words. I caught his eyes for a moment, gray, like Richard's, and there was something there. Guilt? Fear? Before I could pin it down, he looked away. I sipped again. The warmth spread through me, and for a moment, it felt like comfort. My shoulders relaxed, the ache in my back dulled. I sighed, grateful. "You know," Clara said brightly, perching on the arm of the chair beside Andrew, "we've been so excited for this Thanksgiving. The kids can't stop talking about Grandma coming. This year is going to be perfect." "Perfect," Andrew echoed, but it sounded hollow. I smiled anyway, because isn't that what I wanted to believe? That this year would be different. That this time the cracks would heal. I set the empty cup on the coffee table, not noticing how quickly Clara whisked it away, vanishing into the kitchen with her perfect smile. The fire popped, sparks shooting upward. I closed my eyes for just a second, telling myself it was the warmth, the long drive, the comfort of finally sitting down. But somewhere, beneath the haze of exhaustion, a quiet voice in my gut whispered, "Something's not right." Still, I ignored it. Because family takes care of each other, doesn't it? And with that first cup of tea, I stepped blindly into the trap already waiting for me. The dining room table was dressed to the nines, linen runner down the center, polished silver catching the glow of candles, turkey carved and steaming in its place of honor. Crystal glasses chimed as Clara poured cider, her every movement precise, like she was hosting royalty. I sat at the head of the table, the place Richard used to take. A lump formed in my throat, but I forced it down. This was Thanksgiving after all, family first. The kids darted around, giggling, their small hands sneaking for rolls before being gently scolded. Their laughter was the only thing that felt genuine in that room. Clara raised her glass, smiling wide. "To family," she said. "To family," Andrew muttered, eyes fixed on his plate. I lifted my glass, the cider cool against my palm. For a moment, I felt almost at peace. The warmth of the fire, the smell of roasted turkey, the sound of children's voices. It was everything I'd been craving. But then, the fog came. It started small, a buzzing in the back of my head, like static on a radio. My fork slipped against the plate, clattering louder than it should have. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the cranberry sauce. Clara's eyes flicked toward me, quick, assessing. Then she leaned forward, her voice laced with just the right touch of worry. "Mom, are you all right? You look a little pale." I waved her off. "I'm fine, just a long drive." She tilted her head, smile fixed, but I could see the spark in her eyes. She was enjoying this. The kids asked me to tell a story, something about when their dad was young. I smiled, grateful for the chance to feel useful again. "Well," I began, "when Andrew was about 10 years old, he and his friend, what was his name?" The name vanished, just gone. A boy I'd known for years, in and out of my house, eating at my table. My mind was a blank slate. I stammered, laughed nervously. "Oh, that boy down the street, always getting into mischief." The table went quiet for a beat too long. Clara's hand flew to her chest. "Oh dear, that's so unusual, isn't it? Forgetting names like that. Maybe it's just the stress, or, well, age does creep up on us." She laughed lightly, but the sound was sharp. Andrew stabbed at his turkey, his jaw tight. He wouldn't look at me. I forced myself to keep going, cobbling together the story, but the words felt heavy, sticky. My thoughts moved through mud. The children laughed politely at the end, though I could tell the rhythm had gone flat. Heat rose in my face. My hands felt clammy. I reached for my water, but Clara was already sliding another cup toward me. Tea, herbal, steaming. "Here, Mom, this will help. You'll feel better in no time." I hesitated. Just a heartbeat. Then, not wanting to make a scene, I lifted it and drank. The bitterness lingered on my tongue. I caught Andrew's eyes then, just for a second. He looked at me like a boy caught stealing cookies, guilt and fear all tangled together. And then he dropped his gaze, as if the tablecloth had suddenly become fascinating. Conversation picked up again around me, but it sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. Clara laughed at something the kid said, her hand resting lightly on Andrew's shoulder. To anyone else, she looked like the perfect wife, the perfect hostess. But I knew better. Somewhere deep in my gut, beyond the fog pressing in on my brain, I knew. I tried to focus on the food in front of me. The turkey, golden and crisp. Mashed potatoes, creamy and piled high. Rolls baked fresh, their tops brushed with butter. It should have been a feast. Instead, each bite tasted dull, as if my tongue had forgotten what flavor was. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. Clara leaned toward me again, her voice soft. Too soft. "Mom, you really don't seem yourself. Maybe you should lie down after dinner. Andrew, don't you think?" Andrew nodded quickly, still not looking at me. "Yeah, rest would be good. Rest. Always rest." I smiled faintly, trying to mask the panic rising in my chest. If I admitted how I felt, if I gave them even an inch, I knew they'd seize it. "See? She's slipping. She's not capable anymore." So I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and forced my voice steady. "I'm fine. Just tired. I'll be myself again after a good night's sleep." The words sounded hollow, even to me. Clara's smile widened, but her eyes gleamed cold. She had me exactly where she wanted me, confused, embarrassed, doubting myself. The children excused themselves from the table, running upstairs. The clatter of their footsteps faded. The room grew heavy with silence. I sat there, staring into my cup, heart pounding, mind fogging. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger at my own family's table, and in Clara's carefully measured smile, I saw the truth. This wasn't Thanksgiving dinner. It was the beginning of my erasure. The house had gone quiet after dinner. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you can hear your own pulse. I excused myself early, claiming fatigue, and climbed the stairs slowly, one hand gripping the banister like it was a lifeline. My legs felt heavy, my head thick, as if every thought had to wade through molasses. In the guest room, I sank down on the edge of the bed. The room spun gently, not enough to knock me over, but enough to keep me unsteady. The lamp beside me flickered, or maybe my eyes did. I couldn't tell. Get a hold of yourself, Marjorie. I pressed my palms against my thighs, breathing deep, counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. But the fog clung stubbornly, a curtain I couldn't pull back. That's when I heard it. Voices, faint, drifting up from below. The kitchen again. I held my breath, straining. Clara's voice first, low and sharp, like the scrape of a knife against glass. She's halfway there already. Did you see her at dinner? Forgetting names, pushing food around her plate? A few more days, and no doctor in their right mind will call her competent. Andrew's reply was softer, shaky. Clara, I don't know. Maybe it's just the long drive. She's my mom. Your mom is sitting on $2 million worth of land, Clara snapped. And you're drowning in debt. Creditors are circling. Do you want to hand them your last name on a platter? Because that's what will happen if we don't secure the farm. Guardianship is the only way. Guardianship. The word sent a chill crawling up my spine. I gripped the bedpost, forcing myself upright, my heart hammering. My head swam, but I leaned closer to the door, desperate to hear every word. Andrew muttered something I couldn't catch, his voice swallowed by Clara's rising tone. She's slipping already. By Christmas, she'll look like a woman who doesn't know what day it is, and then the court will sign it over. It's foolproof. My stomach clenched. I wanted to storm down there, to slam my hands on the table, to shout that I wasn't slipping, that I wasn't some frail old woman they could drug and discard. But my body betrayed me. My knees wobbled. My tongue felt heavy in my mouth. Maybe I did forget a name. Maybe I am getting old. Maybe... I shook my head violently, clutching the doorframe. No, this wasn't me. This was the tea, the sudden forgetfulness, the fog, the tremor in my hands. It wasn't age. It was poison, dressed up in a porcelain cup. Downstairs, Andrew spoke again, his voice ragged. I can't keep doing this, Clara. Watching her drink it, watching her slip away. It doesn't feel right. Clara's laugh cut through the air, cold and cruel. Grow a backbone, Andrew. You've been spineless your whole life. And look where it's gotten you, buried in bills. Do you think your mother cared about the debt collectors calling at dinner? She doesn't care about your pride. She only cares about that land. If you want a future, you'll follow the plan. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. I pressed my ear against the door, straining, but the voices had dropped lower now, muffled beyond my reach. The edges of my vision blurred. My hands trembled against the wood. I staggered back to the bed, collapsing onto the mattress. My breath came shallow, uneven. I stared at the ceiling, the plaster patterns swimming like waves. My mind screamed that I had to act, that I couldn't let them win. But my body felt anchored, heavy, like someone had filled my veins with lead. What if they're right? A small, traitorous voice whispered. What if you really are losing it? What if Richard's legacy is slipping through your fingers because you can't hold on anymore? I closed my eyes, fighting it. And in the darkness, Richard's voice returned, steady and clear. Don't you ever let anyone take it from you. Not even family if they lose their way. I clung to those words like a rope in a storm. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't crazy. I had heard Clara's words, sharp as daggers. I had heard Andrew's silence, heavier than betrayal itself. My eyelids drooped, the fog pressing harder. My last thought before slipping under was a vow, whispered into the emptiness. They think I'm fading, but I'm still here, and I will not go quietly. The room tilted. The darkness deepened, and I sank into uneasy sleep, half certain I wouldn't wake at all. But I did. And when I opened my eyes, the first light of dawn spilled across the quilt. My body was weak, my mouth dry, but my mind was still mine. They had tried to erase me. They had failed. Morning light streamed through the curtains, thin and pale, like it was afraid to enter the room. I sat up slowly, my head heavy, my throat dry. My body felt like it had been wrung out and left in the sun to stiffen. Every joint ached, every thought sluggish. For a moment, panic clawed at me. What if this was it? What if the fog never lifted? What if I was already halfway to the shadow Clara wanted me to be? I forced myself to breathe. In, out, slow, steady. My phone sat on the nightstand. I reached for it with trembling hands, the screen glowing too bright. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name that felt like salvation. Ruth Callahan. The call connected after 2 rings. Marjorie? Ruth's voice was sharp, clear as a bell, the same tone she had used in the courtroom years ago. Why are you calling so early? You sound terrible. I swallowed hard. I don't feel right, Ruth. Last night, I kept forgetting things. I felt dizzy, foggy, like I was losing my grip. Her silence on the other end was heavy, but not with doubt, with calculation. I could almost hear her brain turning. Tell me everything, she demanded. Start from the top. What did you eat? What did you drink? I rubbed my temple. Dinner was normal, turkey, potatoes, the usual. But Clara gave me this tea, twice. Said it would calm my nerves. Herbal, she called it. Describe it, Ruth snapped. Taste, smell, color, everything. It was bitter, I said slowly. Earthy. She sweetened it with honey, but the aftertaste stayed, kind of metallic almost. And she watched me drink it, like she was waiting for something. I heard Ruth exhale sharply, the sound of a woman who had just confirmed her worst suspicion. Marjorie, listen to me, and listen close. Don't drink another drop of whatever she gives you. Not tea, not water, not lemonade, nothing, you understand? My pulse spiked. You think? I don't think, Ruth cut in. I know. I've seen this before. Certain herbs, certain so-called supplements can mimic dementia, confusion, memory loss, even hallucinations if the dose is high enough. They'll make you look like you're slipping. And if you look like you're slipping, Clara has a case to file for guardianship. The word hit me like a hammer. Guardianship. She'd used it last night. Whispered to Andrew when she thought I was out of earshot. They're trying to erase me, Ruth, I whispered. My own son. Her voice softened for the first time. Andrew's weak, spineless, but this plan, this has Clara written all over it. Tears burned behind my eyes. I thought I was just tired. I thought maybe it was age catching up. But it's her. She's doing this to me. Exactly, Ruth said firmly. And that means you're not crazy. Do you hear me? You're not losing it. You're being poisoned. I clutched the phone tighter, as though her words could anchor me back to reality. What do I do? My voice cracked, smaller than I wanted it to be. You keep a sample, Ruth said without hesitation. Next time she makes that tea, don't drink it. Pretend if you have to. Pour it into a plant, the sink, anywhere. But save a bit. I'll have it tested. That's evidence. Evidence. The word tasted foreign but comforting, tangible, real. And Marjorie? Ruth's voice sharpened again. Don't let her see you doubt her. Act the part. Play the sweet, forgetful mother-in-law if you have to. But don't tip your hand. Predators get mean when they know they've been spotted. I wiped at my eyes with the corner of the quilt. You're coming, aren't you? Already packing a bag, she said. I'll be there by tomorrow morning. If I leave now, I can make it before lunch. You just hold steady until then. Can you do that? Hold steady. The words rooted me, steadied me like the banister on the stairs last night. Yes, I whispered. I can hold steady. Good, Ruth said. Because this isn't just about land or money anymore. This is about your life. And I'll be damned if I let Clara Hale write the ending to your story. The call ended, but her words lingered, strong enough to cut through the fog. I set the phone down, my hands still shaking, but my mind clearer than it had been in days. For the first time since stepping into this house, I felt the shift. I wasn't just a widow hoping for a peaceful holiday. I was a target in a war I hadn't chosen. And now, thanks to Ruth, I had a weapon. I stood, unsteady but upright, and walked to the mirror above the dresser. My reflection stared back. Lined face, silver hair pulled into a bun, eyes a little clouded but still mine. They think I'm slipping, I told the woman in the mirror. But I see them. I see everything. The woman in the mirror didn't smile, but she didn't flinch either. I turned back toward the door, the taste of last night's tea still sour on my tongue. Clara thought she'd written the script, but she hadn't counted on Ruth, and she hadn't counted on me finding my footing again. The afternoon dragged on like a bad dream. Clara busied herself in the kitchen, humming cheerfully as though she hadn't spent the night plotting my disappearance. Andrew disappeared into his office, the sound of a keyboard clicking nervously through the thin walls. I stayed in the guest room most of the day, pacing when I had the strength, lying down when the fog pressed too heavy. Ruth's words replayed in my head. Save a sample. Hold steady. By late afternoon, I made my way downstairs, determined to keep up appearances. Clara was arranging flowers on the coffee table, yellow chrysanthemums in a vase polished to a shine. She glanced up with that dazzling smile. Feeling better, Mom? Much, I lied. A little rest was all I needed. She nodded, satisfied, and turned back to her flowers. That's when I saw it. A folder sat on the edge of the table, just close enough to read the header in bold letters. Petition for guardianship of an incapacitated adult. My stomach dropped. Clara must have caught the flicker in my eyes, because she snapped the folder shut with a sharp slap and tucked it under a magazine. Her smile didn't falter, but her voice lost its warmth. Why don't you go freshen up for dinner? We'll eat soon. I murmured something, yes, of course, and retreated before she could study me further. My heart pounded as I climbed the stairs. The image of that folder seared into my mind. It's real, not just whispers, not just poison in a cup. She's putting it in writing. She's building her case. By nightfall, I sat in the guest room with the lamp off, staring out the window at the yard below. Snow had started to fall, soft flakes settling on the porch rail. The house creaked with the weight of silence. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps against the door. Mom? Andrew's voice, low, tentative. I swallowed hard. Come in. He stepped inside, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like a schoolboy caught cheating. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it as if he needed it to hold him up. Mom, he whispered, I need to talk to you. I waited. His face crumpled. He rubbed his hands together, pacing the room like a man with fire under his feet. Finally, he stopped, eyes fixed on the carpet. Clara, she has this plan. The tea, the doctor, the guardianship papers. She says if you look incompetent, the court will grant it. Once she has guardianship, she can sell the farm, pay off the debts, start fresh. My chest tightened, but my voice came out steady. And you? His head snapped up, shame written all over his face. I didn't want this, Mom. I swear I didn't. But the debt, it's drowning me. We're years behind. Credit cards, the mortgage, the kids' tuition. Clara said this was the only way, that it was for the family. For the family, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. By poisoning your own mother? He flinched, his lips trembling. I never touched it. I never made you drink. I didn't stop her. You didn't stop her, I echoed. Andrew, silence is the same as siding with her. You've stood by while your wife turned me into a patient on paper, while she turned my mind into her evidence file. He sank into the chair by the dresser, burying his face in his hands. I'm weak, Mom. Always have been. You know that. Yes, I said coldly. I know. For a moment, the room was thick with nothing but his ragged breathing and the howl of wind outside. I studied the man sitting across from me, the same boy who once cried when he broke his toy truck, the teenager who sulked through chores, the young man Richard and I had prayed would grow a spine. And here he was, 44 years old, and still a boy hiding behind excuses. You think Clara's saving you? I said slowly, each word deliberate. But she's not. She's saving herself. You're just collateral damage. Do you really believe once she's got the land, she'll still need you? He looked up, eyes wide, like I'd slapped him. Mom, I don't... Wake up, Andrew, I snapped. You're handing your family's soul to a woman who sees you as nothing more than a stepping stone, and you're letting her do it in my name. Tears slipped down his face, silent, ashamed. He shook his head like a man desperate to shake off chains. I don't know what to do anymore. I leaned forward, my voice sharp as glass. Then listen closely. You stop giving her the rope to hang me with. You stop standing in the shadows, hoping it all blows over. Because this is the last straw, Andrew. If you go through with this, you don't just lose the farm. You lose me. He froze, the weight of my words hitting like a hammer. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he whispered, broken, I'm sorry, Mom. But sorry was too small. Sorry didn't stitch up betrayal. Sorry didn't erase the image of that folder, sitting smugly on the coffee table, waiting to declare me unfit for my own life. I turned away, staring out the window at the snow falling heavier now, blanketing the yard in white. Go back to your wife, I said quietly. You've already chosen your side. Andrew stood slowly, his shadow stretching across the room. His hand hovered like he wanted to reach for me, but he didn't. He just lowered it, opened the door, and slipped out. The latch clicked shut. I sat alone in the dark, the truth burning hotter than the tea ever could. My son wasn't just complicit. He was the crack in the foundation Clara had built her empire on. And if I didn't act soon, that crack would take me down with it. The next day, the house buzzed with false cheer. Clara flitted around the kitchen like a queen bee, humming while she set the table for lunch. Andrew sat in the corner, quiet, chewing on his fingernails like a boy waiting for detention. I dressed carefully that morning. Pearl earrings, Richard's handkerchief tucked in my pocket. If this was going to be a battle, I would not face it looking like a victim. When Clara called us in, the table was already set with sandwiches, soup, and, of course, a fresh pot of her herbal blend. She poured me a cup before I even sat down, the steam curling up like a snake. "Here you go, Mom," she said sweetly, placing the papers beside the plate as if they were a side dish. "Just a little housekeeping. If you could sign here, it would make things so much easier for all of us." I looked at the stack. Legal documents, neat and crisp, the kind of thing most people would skim over in trust. But I knew better now. The header screamed it. "Petition for guardianship." Clara smiled, her lipstick perfect, her voice syrupy. "It's just for peace of mind. Nothing to worry about." My fingers brushed the pen, but I didn't lift it. Not yet. The front door creaked open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. And then, like a blessing wrapped in wool and leather, Ruth appeared. She strode into the dining room, a thick scarf still looped around her neck, eyes sharp as ever. She carried a small glass vial in one hand, a folded sheet of paper in the other. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her voice cutting clean through the room. Clara froze for a fraction of a second, then pasted on her smile. "Ruth, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you." "No," Ruth said flatly. "I'm sure you weren't." She walked straight to the table and placed the vial and paper right next to the guardianship forms. "Marjorie told me about your tea. Being the good friend I am, I had it tested." She tapped the paper. "Preliminary results from a toxicology lab. That herbal blend of yours? It contains a neurotoxin. Prolonged use causes memory loss, disorientation, and in some cases, permanent cognitive decline." Silence slammed down like a gavel. Clara's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous. Anyone can fake a report." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "Try me. The lab tech owes me a favor. You'd be amazed what old colleagues can get done overnight." Andrew shifted in his seat, pale as the bread on his plate. "Clara?" "Don't be stupid," Clara snapped at him before she could stop herself. Then, realizing the slip, she straightened, voice sugar again. "This is nonsense. Marjorie must have misunderstood. She's been tired, forgetful, that's all." Ruth leaned forward, both palms on the table. "Save it for a judge, because if you so much as breathe on Marjorie with another cup of that poison, I'll personally see to it you spend the next 15 years staring at prison walls. Attempted elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy. Shall I go on?" The mask cracked. Clara's jaw clenched, her eyes flashing. For once, she didn't have a rehearsed smile to hide behind. Andrew finally spoke, voice trembling. You really did it. You tried to..." He broke off, burying his face in his hands. Ruth turned to me, her tone softening just enough. "You don't have to sign anything today, Marjorie. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Unless you want to. You're perfectly competent. And now we've got proof that someone was trying to make you appear otherwise." I nodded slowly, keeping my gaze locked on Clara. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence was heavier than any scream. Clara shoved back her chair, the legs screeching against the floor. "This is insane. You have no idea what you're doing." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," Ruth said. "And so does the law." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, I saw the fear flicker beneath her bravado. Andrew looked at me, his eyes wet, his voice small. "Mom, I didn't stop her. I didn't protect you. I'm sorry." I kept my tone even, my words slow, deliberate. "You stood by while she poisoned me, Andrew. Sorry doesn't wipe that away." He flinched, tears sliding down his face, but he didn't argue. Clara, cornered, tried one last swing. "You think anyone will believe you? It's her word against mine." Ruth smirked. Funny thing about toxicology reports, they don't lie. The room sat frozen, the only sound the tick of the clock on the wall. Clara's knuckles whitened against the back of her chair. I lifted my chin, my voice quiet but steady. You wanted guardianship, Clara. Well, you got it wrong. I don't need a guardian. What I need is justice. And it's standing right here at my table. Her eyes darted between me, Ruth, and Andrew, calculating, searching for a way out. But for once, she found none. The balance of power had shifted. The hunter had become the cornered prey. And for the first time since stepping into that house, I felt the weight lift. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Isen, the house was still that night. Not peaceful, still, like the eye of a storm. Clara had retreated upstairs after Ruth's broadside at lunch, her heels clicking like gunshots down the hall before the bedroom door slammed. Andrew had been a ghost all afternoon, drifting room to room, staring at the floor. I sat in the study, the one room in this house that still felt like mine. Richard's old desk stood against the far wall, polished oak scarred with decades of bills and harvest plans. His leather chair creaked under me as I leaned back, the lamplight casting long shadows across the bookshelves. The fire burned low, crackling softly. In the quiet, I heard the sound of hesitant footsteps. Andrew stood in the doorway, eyes red, shoulders hunched. He looked less like a man of 44 and more like the boy I used to scold for leaving his muddy boots on the rug. "Mom," he whispered. "Come in," I said. My voice was even, almost too even. He closed the door behind him, lingering by the edge of the rug like he wasn't sure if he had permission to cross. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." He obeyed, folding into the chair like a man carrying too much weight. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hiss of the fire and the faint tick of the clock. Finally, I broke the silence. "Clara will be gone by morning." His head jerked up. "What?" "You heard me," I said. "She has 24 hours to pack her things and leave this house. Divorce papers and a restraining order will follow. I won't allow her to set foot on this land again." He shook his head, stunned. "Mom, that's justice," I cut in. "You stood by while she poisoned me, Andrew. You let her turn my own mind into a weapon against me. You think I'm going to let her keep circling like a vulture?" His face crumpled. "I didn't know what to do." "Doing nothing is still a choice," I said sharply. "And it's the one you made." The words landed heavy, and he bowed his head. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." I studied him, the boy I had raised, the man Richard and I had poured our lives into. Sorry doesn't fix what's broken. But I'm not here to damn you, Andrew. I'm here to give you a road back. Whether you walk, it is up to you. His eyes lifted, wet with shame. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, my elbows on Richard's desk. "You're done here. You'll leave the farm. You'll find honest work, real work, something with your hands, something that doesn't involve Clara's schemes or easy money. You'll start over from scratch and maybe, just maybe, you'll find your backbone along the way." He stared at me, stricken. "You're kicking me out." "I'm giving you a chance," I corrected. "A hard chance, because I can't trust you here, not now. You need to prove yourself somewhere the stakes aren't this high. I'll cover one last debt. The most dangerous one. The one that would ruin you if I didn't. That's my final gift as your mother. After that, you're on your own." Tears slid down his face, and he didn't bother to hide them. "You're cutting me off." "No, Andrew. Clara cut you off. She cut out the man you could have been, and you let her. I'm just forcing you to face the mirror she smashed." He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I don't know if I can do it. You can, I said firmly. You have to. Hail blood doesn't run cold, remember? Your father used to say that. He believed it. Now it's time for you to prove him right. He looked up, broken but listening. You want forgiveness? I asked. Earn it. Not from me, not yet. From yourself. Go work until your hands bleed. Go stand on your own 2 feet without a woman pulling the strings. Then, maybe one day, we'll sit at this table again, and I'll call you my son without bitterness in my mouth. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he nodded, slow, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff with no way back. All right, I'll go. I leaned back in Richard's chair, the weight of my verdict settling heavy but sure. Good, because if you don't, Andrew, you'll drown in the same quicksand Clara pushed you into, and I won't throw you another rope. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Andrew sat there, staring into the flames, tears drying on his cheeks. After a while, he whispered, "Do you still love me, Mom?" The question pierced deeper than any poison. I closed my eyes, steadying myself, then answered the only way I could. I'll always love you, but love without respect is just pity, and I will not pity my son. He flinched, but didn't argue. Slowly he rose, his shadow long against the wall. At the door he paused, looking back like a man who had lost his map. I didn't move, didn't soften, because justice isn't about comfort. It's about truth. And tonight, truth was all I had left to give. 6 months later, spring rolled into Vermont like a hymn. The snow had melted, leaving the fields damp and rich, and the first shoots of green pushed bravely through the soil. The air smelled of earth and rain, tinged with apple blossoms from the orchard. I walked the path along the pasture with Ruth at my side, both of us bundled in light jackets against the lingering chill. She leaned on her cane more these days, but her eyes were still sharp, her voice steady as ever. "You look better," she said, glancing at me out of the corner of her eye. "Stronger. Colors back in your cheeks." "I feel better," I admitted. "Clearer, like the fog finally burned off." She nodded. "It did, because you fought through it. Don't forget that." We reached the old barn, its roof patched after a rough winter, and stood watching a group of local kids plant rows of seedlings in the freshly tilled soil. Their laughter rang across the field, bright and unburdened. "That community garden idea of yours," Ruth said, "might be the best thing you've ever done with this place. You've turned the land into more than just inheritance. You've made it alive." I smiled, watching a little girl carefully pat dirt around a tomato sprout. Richard would have liked it. He always said the land wasn't just ours. It belonged to the future. Ruth chuckled. "He'd be proud you didn't sell it to the first developer flashing cash." I thought of Clara then, her cold eyes, her sharp smile. She was gone now. Papers signed, lawyers involved, her name scrubbed from our lives like chalk from a board. She hadn't gone quietly, of course. But once the toxicology results and Ruth's testimony were in play, she folded fast. Self-preservation had always been her true loyalty. And Andrew, back at the farmhouse, a letter waited on the desk. I had already read it 3 times, each word sinking into me differently. "Mom, I've been working at a carpentry shop in Albany. The pay is honest, the hours long. My hands are blistered, but for once I sleep at night. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe I never will. But I wanted you to know, I'm trying. I'm sorry for what I let happen. I'm sorry for letting her speak louder than my own conscience. I don't expect you to open the door again. I just wanted you to know that I finally stood up on my own 2 feet. I kept the letter folded in my pocket, the paper soft from where I'd traced the words. It wasn't a bridge rebuilt, not yet, but it was a plank. And maybe one day, plank by plank, there would be a crossing again. Ruth interrupted my thoughts with her dry wit. "You're awfully quiet. Thinking about that son of yours?" I gave a small smile. "Always. He's still my boy, Ruth. He made his bed, but at least he's lying in it now. That's more than I could say 6 months ago." She snorted. "Well, don't start knitting him a medal just yet. A backbone takes time to grow." We walked on, the sound of birdsong weaving through the silence. As we passed the garden, one of the kids waved at me. "Thank you, Miss Hale," she shouted, "for letting us plant here." I waved back, my heart warming. The words lingered in the air like a blessing. Thank you for letting us plant here. That was the legacy I wanted. Not court papers, not signatures forged in poison, but life sprouting from the soil. Community, continuity. At the edge of the pasture, Ruth stopped, leaning on the fence rail. "You know, Marjorie, not everyone gets to walk away from something like that with their head held high. You didn't just survive, you set the record straight." I breathed deep, the clean air filling my lungs. "I didn't do it alone. You were the voice in my ear when I thought I was losing my mind." "Damn right," she said, smirking. "But don't give me too much credit. You're the one who refused to go quietly." I laughed, the sound surprising me with its ease. For a long moment, we stood together in silence, watching the children laugh in the dirt, the crops taking root, the hills stretching endless in the distance. The farm was alive again, and so was I. When we turned back toward the house, the sun was breaking through the clouds, spilling light across the fields. I stopped, taking it in. 6 months ago, I had walked into this house carrying a pie and hope, only to hear whispers of my erasure. Today, I walked the land carrying clarity, with the whispers silenced, the truth standing tall. I had not only protected the farm, I had protected myself, my dignity, my voice. And as the spring breeze brushed my face, I whispered into it the words I had once promised Richard. I kept it safe. For both of us. The land didn't answer, but it didn't need to. The roots beneath my feet had already heard, and I knew deep in my bones that I was finally free. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment 1 below. If not, feel free to comment 0 so we know and can improve future videos. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.